A strange spiralling white light was spotted in the early morning sky over Sydney, with even sceptical witnesses wondering if it was a UFO.
They were last seen on the beach with a tall man, and that's the best description police have ever had of him.
More than 17 years after Harold Holt disappeared into raging surf at Cheviot Beach, his widow has finally revealed his last romantic words.
Shocking, terrifying, mesmerising. That's the way a number of Australians have described their alleged encounter with the Yowie.
It's time for the Weird Crap in Australia podcast. Welcome to Weird Crap in Australia. I'm your host, Matthew Soul. Joining me is my co-host, Holly Hunt.
Hello, hello.
This week, we're going to be delving into our first look at cryptids in Australia. If you don't know what a cryptid is, that's the colloquialism of cryptozoic. And a cryptozoic creature is a mythical monster, something that hasn't been documented. There are people who study these things called cryptozoologists, which is at its very best a pseudoscience and to be ignored. I'm sure that's going to upset a lot of cryptozoologists, but I stand by that statement. So this episode, we're going to be talking about what, Holly?
Bunyips and Yowies.
Bunyips and Yowies. Now, these are two Australian species native to Australia and mostly talked about by the Aboriginal communities. That's our native communities here in Australia. Holly, what are we going to talk about first?
Okay, so first up we have the bunyip. Now, the word bunyip itself literally translates into either devil or evil spirit, depending on which Aboriginal dialect you're looking at. This word originates from the Wemba people of southeastern Australia. You'll notice a pattern with these two creatures is that they always come from the southeast. They are different. Our bunyip, theoretically, because of it has varying descriptions. So there is a theory that it's a catch-all phrase for the different monsters that Aboriginal people have, with the different names being chalked up to different dialects because each Aboriginal nation had their own language. Some of the alternate names that we have, the Wowie Wowie, the Yalu, the Kin Praddy, the Dongu, the Bunya, the Money Money. I kind of like that one. That one's from Queensland. And there's also a similar creature called the Mindy, which is a Northern Territory legend. That creature attacked those who broke tribal laws or wandered away from the tribe, which could have been confused into bunyip lore over the years.
One of the things as well to keep in mind here, because of all these different names, it also matches up with the multitude of different descriptions of a bunyip. This is where it starts to get a little bit weird. Now, some of the descriptions we have for a bunyip, George French Angus collected a description of the bunyip from the Murundi people of the Murray River before 1847 and said that the people's much dreaded by them. It inhabits the Murray, but they have some difficulty describing it. Its most unusual form is said to be that of an enormous starfish. So, okay, you're picturing a giant starfish. But then we've got descriptions like an alligator with an emu-like head, which stands on their back legs, an animal the size of a hippo that charged on sight, half as long as a retriever dog, its body jet black, that was from 1872. It could have had a round head, an elongated neck with a tail, and body resembling an ox, from 1848. It was said to be bigger than an elephant at one stage, in a shape like a polybollock, with eyes like live coals and tusks like a walrus. That account was from 1865. And some have said the bunyip was as tall as a gum tree, no pickaninny gum tree, big one gum tree. I'm not messing that up, that's the description as told. The animal tore out trees by their roots and grasped the trees with their arms. That's an account from 1846. And then the common features that were in most 19th century newspaper accounts included descriptions such as a dog-like face, a crocodile-like head, dark fur, a horse-like tail, flippers, and walrus-like tusks or horns, or a duck-like bill. So I've pretty much described for you, through various accounts, every single animal in the animal kingdom. Holly, what are some of the explanations for such varying descriptions of the bunyip?
If it is a single species, if that word is talking about a specific type of creature, that creature comes from an area of Australia that was, I hesitate to use the word colonised, but that seems to be the most politically correct term to use at the moment, by Europeans at the end of the 18th century. The reason for the varying descriptions can be confusion with native wildlife, which, let's be honest, there are some Australian creatures that no one would ever have seen before. Think platypus, kangaroo.
So like for example here, one of the predominant species that we have in Australia is the crocodile. And so that goes, and a crocodile, what it will do is it will submerge itself. And so sometimes you'll only see, say, the ridges on its back, or you'll see its nostrils, for example, and you won't see the rest of the body. So it would be easy to confuse a crocodile, especially in low light conditions, with some other creature.
Especially if it's hiding in the leaves of a gum tree that are touching the water.
Yep.
And it looks like part of its body.
Correct. And the color of a crocodile is, it's designed to match its environment. And so that's why you're going to have those sort of vivid descriptions. Descriptions like a duck-like bill definitely makes me think of a platypus, of course, which is an unusual creature just of itself. If you're not aware of the Australian monotreme, the platypus is a mix of a bunch of different animals. It kind of has the body of a beaver. It has the bill of a duck. It has a spike on its back flipper.
Only the males.
Only the males, sorry. It's a very odd creature, to say the least.
So even in that environment with those kind of creatures hanging around, if you were to see a crocodile, not realize it's a crocodile, having seen crocodiles and alligators before because they're in every museum in Europe, just walking into an environment where there are these crazy, bizarre creatures, you are not going to immediately assume crocodile, you're going to immediately assume what the fuck.
Now, not only that, but we're also talking about the very early days of colonization. You know, most of the accounts of the bunyip are taken between the years of 1840 and 1872. And that means that we're just seeing the very first people starting to colonize Australia. Those people, from, generally speaking, are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds of the time. You're talking about people who have been arrested in Britain and they're convicts and they're being sent over to Australia because Britain's jail cells are filling up. So they have no idea of the country. They're not scientists. They're not experts in zoology. They're just everyday people who have never encountered any of these creatures, which they're now seeing face to face. Especially in England, I think the most dangerous species over in England is the fox. Would that be correct, Holly? I don't think they have...
Aside from cows, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest animals they have over there.
Yeah, so imagine going from that to suddenly seeing these duck-billed beavers and massive crocodiles, which can get as large as 20 feet.
Never mind the kangaroos that can disembowel you with a kick.
Correct. You're starting to see some pretty weird shit very, very quickly.
This was less than 100 years after the first fleet, by the way, so even if there were scientific studies going on in the background, aside from the fact that who would want to go to Australia to study it anyway, there wasn't enough time between then and now for people to actually take these animals seriously.
One of the weird things that I don't have a reasonable explanation for, and this one I find really difficult to get my head around, is that the most unusual form is said to be that of an enormous starfish. I don't have an explanation for that one.
I do.
Okay, shoot. What's the
aliens?
Ah, of course. we're talking a CSIRO situation. Sure. If you've ever read any of the Justice League books, every now and again a villain called CSIRO appears. When you get a chance, type that into Google and you'll see exactly what I mean. Is that the common consensus?
I mean, who will know until we catch it, right? I'm planning an expedition.
There's no natural description that, like, we have starfish on the Great Barrier Reef, but we don't have like fresh water. There's sort of really nothing in our freshwater ecosystem that I could like link up.
Unless someone saw a really skinny crocodile.
Maybe. The Bunyip had a couple of superpowers, though, according to legend. What were some of those powers?
The good old Bunyip was the original eco-warrior for Australia. He was known to hug people to death with his strong arms. However, he was seen as a protector of wildlife and didn't actually go actively hunting unless some idiot with a gun decided to shoot at a kangaroo next to the billabong. His powers were a little on the tame side for a mythological creature. He could alter the water levels of his home, so his area could go from a swamp to really dry land and then back again. And he had a paralyzing roar. Now, I'm not saying this as in, oh God, what's that? I'm talking physically paralyzing you so he could grab you, squish you in a hug, and take you away.
Yeah, according to legend, the Bunyip once hypnotized a woman and kept her as his slave. The spell wore off when the noise of a thunderstorm broke through her programming, which is quite interesting. The Aboriginal peoples at the time obviously would have wanted, Australia is a country that for 10 years can be nothing but wet and can be floods. And then for the next decade after can be dry as a bone. In my own lifetime, I'm 30 years old this year. I've gone through this cycle twice already. When I was growing up, we were in a drought. I think from the age I was about 8 through to 15, there was drought, and then that broke and it gave way to floods for the next 10 years. And we're sort of in the middle of we're starting to see another dry spell starting. So the Aboriginal people were obviously looking for an explanation as to why the conditions that they relied upon would change so frequently.
You know what happens when you have a drought and then a massive downpour? Flash flooding. So you go from dry land to 6 feet of water in seconds. It can be very dangerous, and it can quite easily be attributed to magical ability.
Yeah. Bunyips did devour people. They would sneak up on the unsuspecting and unprepared, and they prefer women. And the Bunyip usually lets out dreadful howls before it jumps on its prey. Aboriginal tribes were afraid to go near any water holes or wells, preserving great caution with their night walks. Now, what would be the logical explanation for this one, Holly?
Now, I know we carp on about this a lot, but crocodiles. Have you ever heard a crocodile hiss?
I have, actually. It's quite disturbing.
Dead of night, no noise, crocodile suddenly hisses while you're walking past the water, and then it jumps.
Yeah, crocodiles are predominantly a drag and kill predator, so what they'll do, and we'll do a whole podcast on crocodile death as well later on in the series, because some of those accounts are very, very chilling. It's essentially the Jaws of Australia, though we also have great white sharks, which we'll do a podcast on. So, everything is trying to eat us here. That's pretty much the consensus.
The only thing that won't kill you is some of the sheep.
Exactly. So and people have also been killed by sheep, which is kind of interesting.
That's why I said some.
So what a crocodile will do is it stays relatively submerged, close to the shore. Something walks past the shore. What it will do, it will lunge forward, usually grabbing a limb, and then it will drag its victim kicking and screaming into the water. Once it's got its prey in the water, it will then go into what's called a death roll, and that's where it will spin its prey in the water, and that usually causes disorientation and starts the process of drowning. And from there, the crocodile will start to devour its drowning prey. In some cases, it will start to eat you while you're alive. Chilling stuff. And you can understand how that could have been turned into this mythical creature. Now, the preference for women, Holly, I would imagine, why do you think that they would describe it as preferring women? Would that be because more women would collect water, or it just be the men were usually armed and able to fight back?
From memory, women did carry a small weapon, but I don't think it would be useful for combat. I think it was more of a, oh, look, a goanna, I can grab that kind of thing. Women would have been unarmed, if not mostly unarmed. They would have been smaller. Every person who sees a woman and a man standing next to each other knows that women don't have much upper body strength. So once a crocodile got hold of your leg, even if you smacked it in the head, you were not going to get it to let go. Women also usually carried the children. You don't want the children drowning, do you?
No. Yeah, so then you create this myth to make sure that your women folk are very, very cautious when they're walking past a body of water.
Yes. Avoid everything that might accidentally kill the people that need to be alive to keep the tribe going.
So we have some famous sightings as well of bunyips. Some that really stand out. Calicum bunyip, which is a carving in Ararat in Victoria, which is dated pre-1851, though they don't know the exact date. There was an annual pilgrimage by the Aboriginal people to retrace the drawing every year. However, it no longer exists as it was worn away with time and lack of care. In 1818, Hamilton Hume and James McKean found large bones, which they attributed to a hippo or manatee at Lake Bathurst. Unknown at the time, though some people speculated it was a bunyip after the fact, when Hume and Meehan failed to return and collect the bones. 1830, George Rankin and Thomas Mitchell found fossilized bones at the Wellington Caves, which they suggested was proof of a large deluge or Noah's Ark, which is usually what happened back in those days. Whenever they found big fossils, it was often suggested that it had something to do with the Noah's Ark myth, or in some people's case, legitimate true story. I'm not going to pass judgment either way. 1845, the Geelong Advertiser ran an article on the sighting claiming a paleontologist was calling a fossil find a bunyip. It said on the bone being shown to an intelligent black, and remember this is of course in context of colonised Australia, which was heavily racist, once recognised it as belonging to the bunyip when he declared he had seen. On being requested to make a drawing of it, he did so without hesitation. The account noted a story of an Aboriginal woman being killed by a bunyip, and the most direct evidence of all, that of a man named Mama Boran, who showed several deep wounds on his breast made by the claws of an animal. 1847, in the Yarra River in Melbourne, a bunyip or an immense platypus, aka a platypus, was sighted sunning himself on the placid bosom. I love descriptors from like classic newspapers. I just, not too long ago, I listened to last podcast and they did a story on Rasputin, Holly, and the way that the Russians wrote their, like the language that they used when they were writing their newspaper articles. It's kind of wonderful.
Well, you got to remember, back then, most people either couldn't read or write or didn't have access to actually printing words. So if you were going to write, you were going to put as many words in that thing as you were going to get.
Yeah, there's this delightful flourish. You know, this bunyip was found sunning himself on the placid bosom of the Yarra River, just opposite the Custom House. It's kind of fun. Now, that was in Melbourne. Now, immediately a crowd gathered and 3 men set off by boat to secure the stranger, who disappeared when they were about a yard away from him. In 1847, the Australian Museum suggested it had a skull which was found on the Murrumbidgee River. They said all the natives to whom it was shown called it a bunyip, and that seemed to be the case. Whenever a fossil was identified, Holly, they would show it to Aboriginal people who would declare it a bunyip, which sort of it leads back to what we were discussing before, and the bunyip seemed to be this catch-all phrase whenever something weird was found.
Well, remember, bunyip means devil or evil spirit, so it couldn't even, they might not even have been describing a creature. They might have just gone, yep, that's an evil bastard.
Like, there are more examples here, of course. Like, you can look these up yourself, but in 1852, there was the William Buckley sighting as well. These all seem to be around finding fossils. And what we know about fossils, of course, is they belong to very large creatures which
Very
died
old.
out millions and millions of years ago. You know,
Not
you're talking.
necessarily. I just
Well,
want to point out.
The consensus is out on there, whether it was a combination of mass extinction, evolution, disease, you name it. But yeah, we had dinosaurs. There are a lot of dinosaurs. They're still finding fossils here in Australia. And you can easily understand how people would be like, what's this giant bone I found? And then they take the giant bone over to an Aboriginal tribe and they're like, oh, that's a bunyip. And they're like, great, we've found another bunyip. What about this bone that looks completely different? Oh, that's a bunyip as well. And that's just because that's how people understood the world that they lived in at the time. And they explained everything through myth. And that sort of leads us to some of the possible explanations of the bunyip. So, Holly, do you want to lay out some of these explanations?
The biggest one, the one that most people put stock in, aside from the crocodile, because we've done that one to death. We'll leave that one alone. But the bunyip may be a cultural memory of extinct Australian marsupials known as the megafauna. Now, Pat Vickers-Rich and a geologist called Neil Archibald also cautiously suggested that Aboriginal legends perhaps had stemmed from an acquaintance with prehistoric bones or even living prehistoric animals themselves. Now, there are three creatures here that used to live in Australia that I'm going to mention that have been linked to at least some of the bones that were described as bunyips and also to the myths. Now, Diprotodon is the first one. He lived in forests, woodlands and grasslands close to water sources. Now, this thing was 3 meters long, 2 meters tall at the shoulder, weighed 3 tons, so he didn't have to worry about crocodiles taking him down. It was solidly built, it ate trees, roots, dug down deep, and sometimes went swimming. Now, the second one is Pelorchistes, which was 2.5 meters long, weighing only 300 kilos at the heaviest. One description mentioned uprooting and stripping trees with said arms. Does that remind you of something?
It reminds me of a bunyip. That's what I was going to say. I wasn't going to say elephant.
Well, the Pelorchistes was an actual creature, so, maybe congruent evolution. But we'll move on. The last one was actually a massive bird called Dromornis that used to strip down trees, was huge, used to hunt people because of it being so big. Its legends came out of one of the Western Victorian Aboriginal tribes. Now, I don't know about you, but if a giant bird was coming after me, I'd make a myth about avoiding the hell out of that thing.
This is true. Now, the reason that some people are a little bit hesitant to bring up these sort of theories is because there is a understanding between white Australians and Native Australians, the Aboriginal peoples. And what can happen is when you're discussing these things is how do I put it? Maybe a cultural insensitivity, towards the Aboriginal people. But what we do on this show is we talk about the strange and the weird, but we also try and offer logical explanations for that.
We're taking an anthropological approach to this. We're not taking a makes fun of approach.
Correct. So the Aboriginal people have their legends, but in the case of these theories is that we had megafauna in Australia, and I'm talking about carnivorous kangaroos that were enormous. We're talking about massive wombats. These wombats were enormous. I've actually seen the bones of prehistoric wombats. They're about the size.
That would be Diprotodon.
Yeah, Diprotodon is about the size, when I saw him, of maybe like a small VW bug. Like, it's a big, big animal. And the thing about it is that there is one theory that the Aboriginal peoples they would use a technique of backburning. They would burn the bush, which was generally dry and arid and easily combustible materials littered the bush.
Called fire stick farming.
Yep. And what they do is they basically scare out the animals so that they could hunt, so they could move their food around. This, of course, is a theory. It's only a theory. And in those cases, what they would do is quite possibly cause the extinction of certain animals, especially the larger ones that would get caught in those fires. And, you know, for whatever reason, this megafauna went extinct in Australia, be it that theory. There are others, including climate change, lack of food, migration that led.
Slow reproductive cycles was also another one. They usually only had kids once every 3 or 4 years.
Yep. So whatever happened there, these animals became extinct and went into the cultural memory, and they were attributed to as legends as opposed to what they were. And that was massive animals that went extinct.
Think dragons in China or, you know, in Europe. Those kind of memories come from things that they've seen and completely forgotten about.
There are a couple of animals that exist today which can be attributed to the Bunyip myth, which we've already discussed crocodiles a fair bit. There are a couple of other suggestions. Writing in 1933, Charles Fenner suggested that it was likely that the actual origin of the Bunyip myth lies in the fact that from time to time seals have made their way up the Murray and Darling rivers, which I find is pretty plausible. Seals are very odd-looking creatures, especially when they get big. They, of course, have been known to attack, make large sort of groaning noises.
Loud.
Yeah, very, very loud. I've also met a seal before, a big male seal in Queensland, and he made some interesting noises that I could perceive as being quite terrifying at night. 2017, so this is a fairly recent theory, in Australian BirdLife magazine, there was an article where Carl Brandt suggested Aboriginal encounters with the southern cassowary form the basis of the myth. According to the first written description of the Bunyip from 1845, the creature, which laid pale blue eggs of immense size, possessed deadly claws, powerful hind legs, a brightly coloured chest, and an emu-like head, characteristics shared with the then undiscovered Australian cassowary. The serrated projections on the creature's bill, each like the bone of the stingray, linked the Bunyip to the Indigenous people of far north Queensland, renowned for their spears tipped with stingray barbs and their proximity to the cassowary's Australian range. You think this theory is pretty unlikely, Holly. Why is that?
Okay, first of all, a cassowary is a bird that stands maybe hip height if it's reaching up. That thing is not going to kill anybody. Secondly, that bird is restricted to the rainforests of far north Queensland. You're not going to get myths about them on the banks of the Yarra River in Melbourne.
This is very true. And, I mean, there is a bit of plausibility here where we can talk about, you know, misappropriation, different people, different parts of the country, all seeing different animals and all giving them the same name of Bunyip. And that comes down to language. People forget that the Aboriginal peoples were, you know, there were several different nomadic tribes that didn't even encounter each other. Some of these different tribes had completely different languages. And if they encountered another Aboriginal tribe, there was a good chance that they couldn't even speak with each other in a shared language. Add on top of that, superstitious colonials coming from Britain, and you almost have the perfect soup for a monster myth, especially one that has so many different descriptions. Our last possible explanation is, of course, aliens. And I know, Holly, you love the ancient alien myth. It's one of your favorite explanations for the pyramids.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I believe. This, of course, this comes down to the idea that aliens, ancient aliens, were here on Earth, and that these aliens had a direct involvement in our cultural development, like the example with the pyramids, Stonehenge, the Aztec pyramids.
Pretty much any sci-fi movie.
Correct. And also, anytime you happen to come across a old artifact or a monument, the people say humans couldn't possibly have built that. It must have been super intelligent aliens sticking their fingers into our collective cultures. I didn't mean for that to sound as dirty as it did, but it did.
Sure you didn't.
On that note, we'll look at our second cryptid for the podcast now, and that is the Yowie, which is a delicious chocolate when I was a kid.
Yes. But for this podcast, we're going to talk about the creature.
Not the chocolate.
Not the chocolate. Sorry, Matthew, you're going to be severely disappointed.
I wouldn't mind discussing the chocolate.
We're not going to discuss the chocolate.
I had a little toy in the middle of it.
All right, moving on. In parts of Queensland, the Yowies are known as quinkin, or a type of quinkin. And I apologise for all of these pronunciations for anyone who knows how they're actually meant to be said, but
You're going to do a better job than me. So
I'm just going to forge ahead and we're going to suffer together. Some of the names that have been attributed to the Yowie are the Jungabina, Jarawara, Mingawin, Padikin, Gubba, Gulaga, Thulagal, Yahoo, Yaroma, Nunkuna, Wawi, Pankalagu, Jimbra.
Now, in 1804, and you did very well on that, Holly.
Thank you.
The book Modern Geography, which was published by John Pinkerton, regards a population of Aborigines that shared Sydney Harbour with another tribe. They were described as flat-nosed with wide nostrils, thick eyebrows, and sunken eyes. Their mouths were of prodigious width, with thick lips and prominent jaws. The Aborigines regarded them as another people entirely, the Yahoos or Yowies, meaning hairy people. Now, if you're acquainted with a little ABC sci-fi show, which is called
Clever Man.
Clever Man, thank you, Holly. That actually deals with a different race or a sub-race of Aboriginal peoples who have supernatural powers. They're very hairy, they're strong, resilient, they can do a lot of damage. They kind of look werewolfish in a way, like this sort of mix between a human and an animal. I happen to think that Clever Man is probably as close as a depiction as you can get to what was described as Yowies by the Aboriginal people.
Or at least by John Pinkerton.
Who was probably a racist. Because 1804, that's what you're going to expect from these people, especially scientists back in the day. Anyone who was
16 years after the first ships arrived, there's no way they're getting along properly in politically correct terms.
The Aboriginal peoples, though, like we said, they had different tribes, different languages, so it wasn't rare for two Aboriginal tribes to find each other, not be able to communicate and see each other as an entirely different people in and of itself. And when you look at descriptors like flat nose, wide nostrils, thick eyebrows, sunken eyes, these were all racist terms that were applied to many Aboriginal peoples back in the day. It's not beyond reasonable doubt to suggest that this was just another tribe of Aboriginal people, a little bit hairier than the other group of Aboriginal people. And everyone was being racist towards everyone else in that example. What other descriptions do we have of Yowies, Holly?
Okay, well, the most widely recognised one is that Yowies was very similar to a little creature that I'm pretty sure you know called Bigfoot. The Yowie was a gentle giant who basically ran when they saw or sensed people nearby, which is why, you don't usually get photographic evidence.
They were basically like, what over there? People will kill us, run! And then they ran through the bush.
Yes, they're going to capture us, put us in a cage. We don't want that. We're getting out of here. Now, a Yowie is described, just like Bigfoot, as a hairy ape-like creature between 2.1 metres, 6 foot 11 inches, and 3.6 metres, 12 feet tall. The Yowie's feet are described as much larger than a human's, but alleged Yowie tracks are inconsistent in shape and toe number, and the descriptions of Yowie foot and footprints provided by Yowie witnesses are even more varied than those of Bigfoot. If you're going to try and bluff your way into a Yowie sighting, the least you can do is consult other Yowie sightings.
Now, the thing about this is every region has its great ape myth. In America, he's called Bigfoot.
Or Sasquatch.
In the Himalayas, he is the abominable snowman or Yeti. Every single continent has their big hairy man myth.
I'm pretty sure that's still cultural memory.
Yeah. We're not that far ourselves removed as far as evolution goes from gorillas. This is the sort of thing that gets shaped into culture. So yeah, every single continent has its own big, hairy creature myth. Unlike the bunyips, which attack a lot of the times, yowies are timid and shy, and if you were injured in the forest, they would take you to their cave and they would caress your hair and they would care for you and coo at you.
You hope.
You would hope. There is some accounts of people being chased, and the best suggestion there is to jump into a waterhole, because for some reason they can't wet their feet.
You know what I think this one is?
Shoot.
The yowie knows the bunyip is in there and it ain't getting in the water with it.
Oh, that's an interesting theory. I like that. They're like, there's a yowie in there. There's a giant starfish monster. And I forgot to mention this when we were talking about the bunyip, but there is a creepy artistic rendering which we'll post on the Facebook page. It looks like a lamprey. It's very, very bizarre. We'll post that as well. So we've got some accounts of people who believe they've seen the yowie or yahoo. There's a European account from 1842. The natives of Australia believe in the yahoo, this being they described as resembling a man of nearly the same height, with long white hair hanging down from the head over their features. The arms are extraordinarily long, furnished at the extremities with great talons, and the feet turned backwards, so that on flying from a man, the imprint of the foot appears as if being travelled in the opposite direction, although they describe it as a heinous monster of an unearthly character and ape-like appearance. Often I find when Europeans describing cryptids or monsters, they often talk about the backwards foot, the backwards leg. Reason for this, I think, there are two reasons. The first being that, and this sort of informs the second reason, but the first reason is that creatures that had the backwards foot are difficult to track. Because whereas we walk forwards and you can look at our tracks and you can make a fairly decent determination as to what's going on, a creature with the backwards setup. What contemporary animals have the backwards setup, Holly?
I honestly have no idea. I can't think of any.
But this was a characteristic that was often attributed to demons, especially as Christianity was starting to become really prevalent.
That makes sense.
In the 17 and 1800s, you'd often have these descriptions of, like Satan had the backwards legs set up with hooves.
Or he'd walk backwards into places so that you didn't realize that he was going in, you thought he was going out, stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that. So demons and monsters sort of became intertwined with nature, and you ended up with people often describing the backwards leg setup. Other sources were collected from Aboriginal peoples. They said the creature is a part of the dream time. Now, my understanding of the dream time, Holly, that is the time before creation?
No, the time out of time.
Time out of time. That explains nothing.
Okay, it's not so much the place where time didn't exist before time began. It's more, it's now, it's then, it's away from now. So it's every when and everywhere. For nerds, it's like a dimension outside of our dimension. Yes, alternate dimension. Let's go with that one.
Yep. Now, that account said that Old Bungaree, a Junida Aboriginal, said at one time there were tribes of them, the Yahoos, and they were the original inhabitants of the country. He said they were the old race of blacks, the Yahoos, and the blacks used to fight, and the blacks always beat them, but the Yahoos always made away, being faster runners. This is another theory as well, when we're talking about alternate offshoots of human evolution. Currently, I think the consensus is that there were 3 different types of human getting around at one stage. You had the Homo sapien, the Neanderthal, and
Denisovians.
The Denisovians.
There's also a couple more up in Indonesia which might be more specific to this area. This area of the world didn't actually see much Neanderthal action, but they saw Homo florenthus and they saw the Homo denisovius.
So that's 2 different species of human. It's not that crazy to think that perhaps different types of human were all living together, interbreeding eventually, or wiping each other out to extinction, as is natural selection's want. Continuing forward on some of the sightings, in an article entitled Australian Apes, which appeared in 1882, Henry James James McCooey, claimed to have...
That's an Australian name.
It is. Claimed to have seen an Indigenous ape on the south coast of New South Wales, between Bateman's Bay and Ulladulla, and he would have said it a little something like this.
Oh, here we go.
A few days ago, I saw one of these strange creatures on the coast between Bateman's Bay and Ulladulla.
I have to commend you for your accent, but unfortunately I do have to tell you that at that point in history it would have been far more English than Australian.
A few days ago, I saw one of these strange creatures the coast between Bateman's Bay and Ulladulla. I should think that if it was standing perfectly upright, it would be nearly 5 feet high. Is that better?
That's better, yep.
Throughout, I will try and pull out accents and funny voices where I can, because it is my want. The Springbok region in southeast Queensland has had more Yowie reports than anywhere else in Australia. In 1977, former Queensland Senator, this is where we do a massive jump forward. The difference between Yowies and Bunyips is the Bunyip sightings pretty much stop after the 1800s. So they get up to about 1880 and then that's it.
By the time photographs came in, the Bunyips vanished.
Correct. However, the Yowie never stops. To this day, and we have some recent examples we're going to talk about, but to this day, people still think that they see Yowies. So yeah, in 1977, former Queensland Senator Bill O'Chee reported to the Gold Coast Bulletin that he had seen a Yowie while on a school trip in Springbok. O'Chee compared the creature he saw to the character Chewbacca from Star Wars, telling reporters that the creature he saw had been over 3 meters tall. Now, this isn't something that just sort of came out of nowhere. After Star Wars came out in the 1970s, there was a massive uptick in big animal sightings, big hairy ape sightings, and often the attribution would be, it looks like a Chewbacca. And the question is, like, obviously these myths exist before, but were people more readily misidentifying things because of Star Wars?
Or was it now something that they could visibly attribute it to it? Oh, it looks like Chewbacca rather than Chewbacca looks like it.
Now, I happen to think the first theory is probably more accurate. What happens is, like, the way that humans evolved is we had to see patterns, right? You got a cheetah in the jungle. You have to be able to recognize the cheetah in the jungle. And so our brains are very good at picking up patterns. And what they do is our brain will make an attribution. So if you see a Chewbacca and then you see something weird in the bush that you can't quite explain, your brain will sort of superimpose the pattern over the top. You know, for people who partake in hallucinogenic drugs, for example, if they're sitting there tripping balls and you turn around and you say something along the lines of, what do you think of that fox? They will immediately probably start hallucinating a fox or some sort of furry creature. It's just what our brains do. It's an old survival mechanism. So in 1977, residents on Oxley Island near Taree became convinced the blood-curdling screams heard at night were connected to a local sighting of a huge black furry creature. Could also have been a Tasmanian devil. They have a horrible, horrible scream. So let me just play for you Tasmanian devil. So what you think? Ooh, chilling stuff. Very creepy.
I do have to poke a little bit of a hole in that one.
Shoot.
This particular sighting is in the middle of New South Wales in 1977.
That is true. However, weirder things have happened than a species from Tasmania being brought to New South Wales.
It's true.
Could have also been someone being murdered.
Yeah, well, there is that.
The 1960s throughout to the 1990s was sort of like right around the world with this weird hotspot of serial killers. It wouldn't be that crazy to think that that could have been a possibility. Now, in 1994, Tim the Yowie Man claimed to have seen a Yowie in the Brindabella Ranges.
I bet you can't work out what his claim to fame is.
He saw a Yowie. I'm hoping to do an interview with Tim the Yowie Man at some stage for this podcast. He actually lives in our local area. We live in Queanbeyan, which is essentially the sister city to Canberra. Basically, that the two cities share a border. And the Brindabella Ranges about 20-25 minutes away from us where we live right now. And the Brindabella Ranges are a hotspot for Yowies, UFOs, big cats, all sorts of fun things that we're going to be covering later on in different podcasts.
Also a hotspot for hallucinogenic use, but you know.
Yes, this is true. So in 1996, I should say, while on a driving holiday, a couple from Newcastle claimed to have seen a Yowie between Braewood and the coast. That's about 30 minutes from where we are, which would make our area a Yowie hotspot, which makes sense. There's a lot of bushland around us. They said it was a shaggy creature walking upright, standing at a height of at least 2.1 meters tall, with disproportionately long arms and no neck. In the year 2000, in August, a Canberra bushwalker described seeing an unknown bipedal beast in the Brindabella Mountains. Bushwalker Steve Piper caught the incident on videotape. That film is known as the Piper film. It's 22 seconds of grainy footage that looks like a man in an ape suit limping off in the distance. I call bullshit on it. It's very similar to the Patterson film. In America, that was the famous Bigfoot footage. That was also bullshit.
I have to make one big point here about this footage. Every description says a Yowie is white. That's a black suit.
Yep, it definitely looks like bullshit to me. You can check it out. Just type the Piper film into YouTube and it'll pop up and you can have a look and make a determination for yourself.
And hey, you tell us why you think it's real.
Yeah, you can. Let us know in the comments. In the late 1990s, there were several reports of Yowie sightings in the area around Acacia Hills in Northern Territory. One such sighting was by mango farmer Katrina Tucker, who reported in 1997 being just meters away from a hairy humanoid creature on her property. Photographs of the footprint were collected at the time. In August 15, 2001, Mrs. Cruton saw the Yowie-like animal at midnight on the corner of McGrail Road and McGowie Road. The Queensland Times reported the incident and interviewed Senior Constable Johns, who said the lady saw something that looked like an ape approaching the road as she was driving along. It was walking on all fours. Senior Constable John says the lady was lucid and sane, so he accompanied her back to the site to search for the beast after she reported it.
I do have to ask, how slow a night was it?
Oh, for a police officer to be like, fuck it, I'll go have a look for a Yowie, it would have been a very, very slow night for police officers. Generally, our police officers definitely understaffed, just like they are around the world, and they've usually got better things to do. They go hunting for Yowies.
Yeah.
2010, a man in Canberra claimed a Yowie was in his garage. This is a bit weird. This one is definitely weird. It claimed it was trying to communicate with him. And I'm going to read this story to you. It's quite fun. Matthew Jones was totally unprepared for what he saw as he stood in his garage in suburban Canberra in October last year. Packing boxes for a house move, he was confronted by a stocky, hairy monster standing in the corner of the garage staring at him. The creature, according to James, was a juvenile covered in hair with long arms that almost touched the ground. It was inquisitive about what I was doing, he said, and it was definitely trying to communicate with me.
I have 3 questions here before you go into anything. I have 3 questions. How does he know it was a juvenile? Did he ask it? How does he know it was trying to communicate with him? Was it speaking English? And how do you know it was a monster? It could have just been there to watch you.
So I don't have any answers for any of those questions. My understanding of this one is that when it comes to the creature trying to communicate with Jones, that it was psychically trying to communicate with him.
I figure point and grunt.
I thought my understanding of the story was that it was trying to telepathically communicate with his mind.
Remember
That's
what
why
I
it's a
said
bit
about hallucinogen use?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny one. Yeah. In March 2011, a witness reported to the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service that they saw a Yowie in the Blue Mountains at Springwood, west of Sydney. The witness had filmed the creature and taken photographs of its footprints. In May 2012, a United States television crew, Animal Planet, claimed it had recorded audio of a Yowie in a remote region on the New South Wales-Queensland border. The 4-member team from Animal Planet's Finding Bigfoot. These guys are a bunch of fucking losers. I hate this show. Don't watch the show.
But we have a clip for you to listen to.
We do. They believe that they recorded a Yowie yelling in the region, and we're going to play that for you right now. So have a listen to that.
It's very short, isn't it?
It is very, very short and sounds like nothing except wind.
Or someone screaming off camera.
Yep. So, yeah, you can make up your own mind about that, but Animal Planet's Finding Bigfoot series is fucking obnoxious. And yeah. So in 2013, Bexhill, New South Wales, a resident claims to have seen the Yowie. The latest sighting took place recently just north of Bexhill when a Lismore resident and music videographer spied the classic creature crossing a moonlit bungalow road. The witness, who asked not to be named for fear of reprisal.
That's a clue.
Why would they be reprised against by the Yowie?
Well, obviously they don't want people thinking they're crazy. But if you're stupid enough to open your mouth about this kind of thing...
Yeah, I'm still not sure what his reprisal, what he was worried about. But he said he was driving back home from a night of filming at Eltham and had just turned onto the bungalow road heading for Lismore when he spied a creature jumping a barbed wire paddock fence before briefly pausing at the edge of the road. Suddenly, the beast moved across the 2 lanes of bitumen, raising his arms to apparently shield its eyes from the bright high beam glare of the approaching car. He said, "I would have seen it for between 20 to 30 seconds. It was really moving at the time. It leapt the fence no problem. All I can remember was seeing this large black object with solid build, lanky legs, long, lanky arms. It wasn't clothed. It wasn't wearing clothes like a human." The witness said the creature ran with a fast stoop pace. It had high shoulders and almost no neck and a small head. It was like its head was shrunken into its shoulders, he said. And I say he was very, very tired and was hallucinating. Because you see weird things out on the road at night when there isn't much street light and all you've got is the headlights and you've been up all night DJing.
When
you're
you're
going to see some weird shit.
Especially
Yeah, exactly. In March 2014, 2 Yowie searchers claimed to have filmed the Yowie in South Queensland using an infrared tree camera, collected fur samples, and found large footprints. Later that year, a Gympie man, and that's not a man who has a gimp, it is a man from the town of Gympie, told media he had encountered Yowies on several occasions, including conversing with and teaching some English, which was very nice of him. Taught English to a very large male Yowie in the bush northeast of Gympie, or a homeless man, and several people in Port Douglas claim to have seen Yowies near Mowbray and at the Rocky Point Ridge. So as you can see, the Yowie continues to this day.
There is one big question here with all these sightings. People have collected photographs, they've collected footprints, they've collected fur samples, they've collected, audio-visual evidence. The only bits that have ever shown up in the public domain are the aired clip from Animal Planet and that 22-second bit of grimy Piper footage.
Yep.
Where is the rest?
Because it's generally bullshit. If you had fur, you would simply take it to a scientist, be like, I have this fur, it belongs to Bigfoot, or in this case, Yowie, and then the scientist would do a DNA profile, offer you, and be like, okay, you found this new species, let's go check this out.
More likely they'd raise their eyebrows at you and go, are you freaking serious? It's kangaroo hair.
Yeah, and that's always going to be the problem, because the scientific community relies on facts and evidence in order to postulate theories, in order to come up with, laws. Like, we have the law of gravity. Why? Because we can prove it. we have the theory of evolution. Why? Because there's enough evidence to suggest it. In the case of cryptozoological creatures, and this is why I have such a distaste for the cryptozoological community, is because a lot of their claims are based on faith. It's and really spurious scientific reasoning.
Anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, so someone says, I saw this thing, or someone says, the world is so big, there have to be undiscovered creatures in it. And the way that undiscovered creatures work is if someone is an expert in ants and they find an ant that isn't like the other ants, then they discover a new species of ant. That's how it works. It's very rare that people just go, oh, look, there's this creature that we've never ever seen before, and look at this thing. It's usually a subspecies of a main species that we know and understand.
There are only 2 places left on the planet where you can find creatures that have never been found before in any decent size number. The bottom of the Mariana Trench and the middle of the Earth.
Exactly.
Unless they're the size of bacteria, but that's a whole different kettle of fish.
And so the cryptozoological community, to answer your question, Holly, one, anyone who finds evidence that they're usually full of shit, or they won't hand it over to scientists because they know that they're full of shit. And it's all faith-based. It's just like religion. The belief in Bigfoots and Nessie and all of these sort of animals and amazing creatures, it's based on faith.
We do have to point out here that there is a difference between what we're claiming as faith and Aboriginal mythology. There's a big gulf between that. We're not calling Aboriginal mythology faith in the same realms as faith healing, all right? We're putting a wedge in there.
Yeah. There is a clear distinction between people on the internet who believe in Yowies and Aboriginal peoples who hold the Yowie legend as part of their cultural spiritual belief. There is a big difference there, and Holly stated that. Okay, so some of these explanations, which we've discussed, over-enthusiastic Bigfoot hunters spooking themselves. You take a bunch of people, you put them in the bush at night, and you expect them not to freak out at any little noise.
Or you have some asshole off in the bush just snapping their fingers when it's really quiet and scaring the fuck out of them.
Correct. We know that such tribes existed in Sydney when the Europeans arrived and were wiped out. That's what we're talking about at the top, but with different species of human. And then, of course, the legend spread from there, and lost members of the tribe were never seen again, or maybe they were seen in rare patches here and there. Shadows and light trickery. Usually these creatures are seen at night and late when people don't focus and while they're driving. Holly, you've got one last one that you've touched on a little bit already.
This explanation is a little bit technical, so this is why I have to explain it, because I've done a whole lot of research into this. There are many subspecies of humans. Over the millennia that humans migrated from Africa or India or wherever they've decided this century that we've moved from, they split into little groups. Now, I've mentioned the Denisovians and the Florenthesis. Because of the way that the waves moved from in the surge from Africa or wherever, it is possible that some of those people not only reached the North mainland of Australia, where we have evidence of Aboriginal trading with Indonesians, but those people could have spread along the coast, down the south, to where everyone knows them, everyone trades with them, and then they stop coming. And so you talk about them. You wonder where they are. They enter into cultural memory, and then those hairy people, while they're extinct, are still there in cultural memory. That's my theory.
And they become myth.
Yeah.
And of course, our age-old explanation is
aliens.
Yes. Whenever there's a monster or a cryptid or anything like that,
or something happens we can't explain,
there is always going to be the suggestion of alien.
Da-da-da-da.
Oh, now we have to pay copyright.
No, we don't. It was less than 8 seconds.
So yeah, that was our rundown of Yowies and Bunyips. There's a lot there. I'd encourage you to check out and do some of your own research. When it comes to Bunyips, we found that they pretty much they popped up in the 1800s and disappeared in the 1800s, whereas Yowies, we continue to see them to this
more and more
day.
rapidly, by the way. More and more often.
More often. So there you go. If you happen to have ever come across a Yowie, we would like to hear from you. And the easiest way to do that is to find us on Facebook, and you can find us on Instagram, because I'd love to hear some personal stories of people coming across Yowies, and you can let us know via any one of those social media platforms. Now, I'd like to thank my host, Holly Hunt. Holly, where can people find your other work?
Well, I am the host of Beyond the Words podcast. Every week I interview an author about a particular part of writing a book.
So, in the meantime, please stay safe, keep a lookout for cryptids, and we will return with more weird crap in Australia next time.
See ya.
Bye for now. The Weird Crap in Australia podcast is produced by Holly and Matthew Soul for The Modern Meltdown. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please rate and review on your favourite podcatching app.